Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm the host, Josh Williams, and I'm joined by my co-host, David Hughes. Dave, how's things?
Very good, thank you, mate.
How are things at Everton Towers, mate?
I don't know. I'm firmly taking up my seat in these Liverpool towers. I'm just going to stay here for a few weeks, let it all blow over.
Yeah, it's warmer and a lot more stable over this side, I think.
Yeah, it always is.
But anyway, I mean, this is the transfer special episode. This is the one that we do every summer, really, and we try to get in as quick as possible around who we're going to sign for Liverpool this summer if we were in charge, sort of thing, how we would manage the squad. We tried to get in as early as possible, but obviously Liverpool being Liverpool have already announced Ibrahima Konate. So we're going to have to just factor that one in like he's already signed. That's a little bit unfortunate, but we'll have to deal with it. I suppose Liverpool doing early business is a good sign. You know, we can't really moan too much about it, but what we're going to do is, you know, I don't know Dave's answers. He doesn't know mine as usual. Typical Analysing Anfield. And we're going to go through the squad and we're just going to determine, you know, what we do in certain departments, which players we'd keep, loan, players we'd buy, and obviously within reason as well. So, you know, we're not suggesting Kylian Mbappe. I assume, Dave, you haven't.
Yeah, that's half the listeners that I've just turned off now.
Yeah. So we're trying to keep it logical, trying to keep it realistic. And just before we start, Dave, how did you find it?
Yeah, all right, yeah, fine. It's something a bit different, isn't it? And, yeah, thought it was quite straightforward in parts, certainly in terms of decisions on players. Yeah, but I won't say much more for now.
See, one thing I found with it was, obviously we will get to it, but when it comes to whether you would sign a certain player, a lot of it really does come down to, well, yes, but if he's sold, do you know what I mean? Like a lot of it's ifs and maybes as to what will actually happen during the window before you then get the open door to go and do this and that sort of thing. But we will get to that anyway, and we'll start off absolute basics with the goalkeeping department. So I assume you're keeping Alisson Becker, Dave.
Just about, yeah, just about it. I let him off because he scored that goal, otherwise he was out. Oh yeah, he's it goes without saying, doesn't it? Really, one top keepers in Europe. Yeah, you know, Liverpool have done really well to bring him in, and he's been a huge success.
So Liverpool obviously have a little bit of a small decision to make in the backup goalkeeping department. Adrian is out of contract. Would you keep him, Dave? Would you move up Kelleher? It's a second choice, or would you go and sign some form of backup?
You know, I did sit on this one for a little minute. And personally, I'd avoid spending any spending any cash or putting aside any resources for the new number two, and probably stick with Kelleher. Because you know he had to he come in under difficult circumstances this season, played about maybe over 700 competitive minutes. In fact, I think it was just over 700 competitive minutes, and he performed well. You know, he performed exactly what you need from your reserve goalkeeper. He's also going to be happy to be an understudy to Alisson for the time being. In fact, you know, I've got his numbers up here. Now, when you're using Y-Scouts, so take these with a pinch of salt. But just to give you a rough idea, conceded 9 goals from an this is post shot as well. Expected goals against a 13.1. So, you know, that's fairly decent numbers. You know, for how long he played, which was, as I said, just under 800 minutes actually. So he did quite well when he come in, and that's exactly what you need from a number two. Alisson, on the other hand, I think you'll agree. It's not Alisson. Adrian, on the other hand, I think you'll agree, didn't really, you know, impress us that much, did he, when he come in? And I think he's a player that I'd be quite content to see leave.
Yeah, understatement. No, well, I want to come across too bad. Because I know he did help us in certain moments. Always think back to the Super Cup final and games like that. But at the same time, just it's not a nice feeling when you've got a keeper like that in goal. You're just permanently on edge. So I would have no issues with moving Kelleher to my second choice. I think he's good on the ball as well, which is something I didn't mention there. Very composed in possession. Obviously, only 22, I think he is still. So, and if it gets to a point where, say for example, he has a bit of a Emi Martinez run of form, as he did at Arsenal, and then Arsenal end up raising about 20 million for the services and end up getting sold. That then Liverpool have got a bit of a fee there for the player who's come through the academy. So I've got no issues with keeping him as second choice and using him in domestic cup games. So yeah, quite an easy one for me, that one. But what about your defence, Dave?
Are we starting with right back or just as a general?
I'm not sure I will do this. We'll go with right back, yeah. So
yeah,
are you doing anything to right back at all?
Probably not. No, unless there was an opportunity that arises in terms of getting an understudy for Trent, then maybe. But that is on paper what Nico Williams is. Okay, he hasn't played his best football, but he's still a fairly young lad, isn't he? When he's come in sometimes, so I'm inclined to think he's shown he can do a job when he does come in. Obviously, Trent's going nowhere anytime soon, and what you've got to remember with Trent, not only is he, a key foundation within the side, one of the first names on the team sheet. That's normally quite regular for a player in the prime who's, maybe got 1 or 2 years left, and you are thinking about, 3 years down the line replacing him. But he's still like, how old is Trent? Is he like 22, 23?
Yeah, he's something
Yeah,
like that, yeah. I think it's yesterday, but I think he was 22.
Yeah, so you could make a case that he's still 4 or 5 years off being his prime years. So you don't really want to be bringing in a player who'll be expecting to play football. I think Nico Williams is a good understudy to have. So I'm not touching the right back position.
No, I'm not either. I've got Trent as my first choice. Nico is the backup. And I'll throw in there as well, which I think I've mentioned in previous episodes every now and then. I would also, every now and then, if Trent is unavailable, I would throw Ox as the right back, just to see how he gets on. I know he played there for Arsenal, played as a wing back at times. And I think he's got certain traits that are applicable to the role. Obviously, he's really mobile. Naturally inclined to dart down the wing before putting crosses in. Good runner. And I think defending 1v1, he's quite a force, isn't he? So I think from an opposition perspective, I don't think he'd be an easy player to just dart past 1v1. He's quite physically, he's along the lines of Kyle Walker, really, isn't he? So, I think he'd be an interesting player to test out there. So yeah, I'd totally avoid right backs. I don't think we need a right back. And in terms of left backs, for me, Dave, it's the same. I'd obviously keep Andy Robertson where he is, and although Tsimikas has had a quiet year, I do think there's underlying reasons behind that. I think given that the league he's come from for the start, the standard's completely different, and then couple that in with the fact that if he was going to play at any point throughout the season, it was always going to be without the first choice or second choice or third choice centre-back. So, considering Klopp wants to keep some sort of consistency with his back line, that's why Trent and Robbo ended up playing virtually every minute. But I think if Van Dijk was fit for the whole of the season and Gomez played all season, I think we would have saw Tsimikas a lot more. And I think next season that will be the case. Robertson will remain his first choice, I'm sure. But I just mean he'll get used off the bench a bit more. He'll get rotated a little bit more. He needs a break. So I've got no issues touching that department.
Yeah, I agree. I'm having a look now, and Robertson played all 38 Premier League games this season in one capacity or the other, which is a lot, isn't it? And I agree. I think there would have been more opportunities for him had things not panned out the way they were. And there was already so much upheaval next to him. Then it could have weakened the defence even further, putting him in that environment. So yeah, I agree. He's untested at the moment. Nothing about him. He's basically the same player that arrived. When he first come in. In terms of what you know about him, what he'll bring. So you're still in the same position. So yeah, let's see what he can actually do first before making any kind of comments.
If you think of Robertson as well, when Robertson first came, he didn't really start getting looking until Christmas, after the summer. And if you think of where Liverpool were this season, around the Christmas period, that was roughly when the centre-back department started to collapse a little bit. So you could argue the second half of the season, when Tsimikas might have been used a bit more, was when Liverpool almost collapsed a bit. So yeah, again, next season, have a look at him, see how he gets on. But now, Dave, bit more detail now. This one, we might have some contrasting views here. So the centre-back department, obviously we have Van Dijk. We have now Ibrahim Konate, Joe Gomez, Joel Matip, Nat Phillips, Ben Davies, Reece Williams. What do you do? You know what I mean?
It's starting to look a little bit bloated on paper, at least, isn't it?
Yeah. The thing is, it looks bloated, but you've still got that thing in the back of your head, haven't you? Where like Liverpool's departments out of nowhere this season, at least, just become empty very, very quickly. So the way you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, get rid of Williams, get rid of Davis, whatever," you could do that and then encounter a similar scenario. It's highly unlikely, but it's in the back of your head. But how are you assessing the centre back department then?
Well, the obvious kind of deal with the red flags first. I think worst case scenario, you could look at it and say, does Van Dijk retain the play that he was? An elite player, at least in his position, but then coming back from a serious injury, there's always doubt, especially with knee injuries. I don't care how great of a professional you are, how hard you've worked. I think it's really difficult to at least guarantee you'll come back to the player he was. That being said, we're hopeful that he is. So hopefully he comes back and doesn't start breaking down as a player and just becomes this consistent performer again. Konate, again, I know there's been loads of caveats to this, but all I will say is he has had a suspect injury record, in his kind of senior career. So there could be another red flag there. Gomez, you'd expect to kind of come back and make a full recovery given his age. Matip, we know what Matip's like. You can't get a consistent season out of him. So if you look at it from that rather pessimistic point of view, first and foremost, you can see some issues there, can't you? And suddenly that squad won't look as bloated because there's no guarantee those players will be reliable. If you flip it though and you say, Van Dijk comes back, he is. The caveats with Konate explain why, he's missed some games and he starts becoming a consistent performer. Gomez back to normal. You've got three really strong centre-backs. Matip is your fourth. Matip probably becomes more reliable, as stupid as it sounds, because he's not having to be used week in, week out, meaning you can protect him a little bit better. So then that's really good, isn't it? And then you can start looking at your Phillipses, your Williams, Davis, and thinking, well, what do you do with them? And I guess, that's probably your next question.
Yeah, that's it. I think the four first choice players, let's say, I think are fairly obvious. It is Van Dijk, Konate, Gomez, and Matip. But at least, well, all four of them, as you just said, all four of them have very slight, maybe concerns that you'd label at them when it comes to fitness, when it comes to availability. So, as I said, it is a delicate department, I think is probably the way of putting it. We'll know a lot more about it by January, say half the season's finished. But when it comes to starting the campaign, you just don't really know too much. But we'll start with Phillips, Dave. So what are you doing with Nat Phillips?
So 12 months ago, we were doing this in the exact same situation with the exact same players. I'd be inclined to sell on the back of his success. And I must admit, I'm still in that camp. Well, I'll caveat in a moment, but I just think he's not as good as those four players, those four first choice centre backs, but he's proven himself as a consistent Premier League level centre back, and he's got all the desirable traits to go with it. He's really good in the air, he's strong, decent on the ball. And I think there's a lot of sides in the Premier League who are looking for centre backs like that, and he could probably go to any side from the top 5 sides downwards and be a starting centre back. So on that reason, I'm tempted to sell him. and get profit on them while the stock is this high, because it's unlikely to be like that in 12 months' time. But I do want to say, just before we move on to someone else or you talk about them, I would be inclined, that if the sale didn't come up or no offers come in, to keep him, just to protect some of those issues we talked about with the other four in terms of potential fitness problems.
Yeah, I think for me, I would be inclined to keep him at the minute this summer. And the reason for that is just almost as a safety net, as a bit of insurance, as to if things do start to go wrong again, or if for whatever reason Van Dijk can't start playing 3 games a week suddenly, or Gomez takes a bit longer, or whatever, I would be inclined to keep Phillips as a 5th choice player. If a bid comes in for him from a Premier League club or whatever for over 15 million, I'd be tempted to get rid. Simply because of what you've just said, and this is kind of how you have to think a lot of the time. Is this player's stock ever going to be as high as it currently is? That was very much the case with Brewster. Liverpool fans were very much like, just loan him to Sheffield United, let him go on loan. But he just spent half a season at Swansea, scored something like 11 goals. And imagine how much he'd cost now. Imagine how much Liverpool would be able to sell him for now if he just had a full season on loan at Bramall Lane, didn't score once. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how you got to think. But with Phillips, although I'm thinking along those lines with stock and, is he going to be worth this much again ever? I still can't help thinking about what has happened this season and how Liverpool have to guard against that. So if Liverpool's season next year up until the January window is perfectly normal, no issues, and Phillips is, I suppose, wants to play more, then I'd be a bit more inclined to sell him. But up until that point, I do think he should start the season at the club just in case anything goes wrong, because I think he's proved he can come in, be a bit of a reliable presence, and just do a job until things get a bit more safe.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Reece Williams, Dave, what are your thoughts on him?
He'd be if the option's available, I'd probably look to loan Williams out. I think he's shown enough that he could go on to have a really high ceiling and be a top central defender.
So would you loan him to the Premier League or Championship?
I'll be honest, I'd actually probably aim for the Championship side.
Yeah, I would as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best environment for him to learn. And would he play? Guarantee. Would he play in the Premier League?
Yeah, I must admit, I don't think he's overly ready for Premier League football. I think Liverpool's system largely protects them because of how ingrained it is and how dominant it is at times. But I think at just a standard club, say for example Everton, Dave, or any club in the Premier League, really.
Don't mention the E word.
But what about then Ben Davies? Because this is a very tricky one to make a comment on, because I've got no clue. I've got no real clue how good he is, really. And I don't overly know the story behind it. I do think it's along the lines of Liverpool got him in as an additional centre-back, and Kabak was kind of the first to be ready to play, let's say. And he just got in before Davies did. And I think along the way, Davies has picked up the odd knock as well. So it's difficult to determine what to do with him this summer.
Yeah, I agree. He's a tough one. I honestly, I think what you do with him depends on what, if there's any interest in him. If the Championship club comes back in and offers to double the money paid, I think it was only about 1.5 mil or something, wasn't it? Really small like that. If you can, or do you pay 4 mil, 5 mil, you probably sell him. And he's a player that's highly rated. I saw bits of him. He was good. I spoke to Guy, our producer, who watched a lot of Preston. Said a top centre back, probably one of their best. So he was a high-end Championship player. He probably could adapt to the Premier League quite well, and a move to the Premier League was most likely on the horizon. Maybe just not to Liverpool, but it hasn't really happened so far. If Liverpool didn't have the quality they have in that position already, you'd maybe be more inclined to say give him a shot. But he's quite clearly going to be maybe fifth or sixth choice. So do Liverpool really need him on the books? Probably not. And I'd be inclined to sell if you can make a profit.
Yeah, he was very much an emergency sign. I think Ben Davies, obviously Liverpool got him for a really reduced price because his deal was running out in 6 months. So I think given that he was an emergency, we didn't really need him as an emergency in the end. And now you could argue that crisis is kind of over. I would be inclined to sell him myself. I think if Liverpool could get, the way Edwards tends to work, if Liverpool could get between 5 and 10 million for him, considering he is English, I think he's around 25, 26, good on the ball. There's no real issues there. Plenty of clubs would take him. Celtic were after him. So if Liverpool can get between 5 and 10 million for him, I think that would be great business. Possibly, if need must, send him on loan, but I don't think I'd be inclined to keep him around. But, that's a difficult one because we don't know the story behind the scenes. And then the final question, Dave, when it comes to the defence, any more signings?
I think for the reason that, there's players that we've talked about, haven't we, in the past, Pletica, Botman and all them, but I just feel like, given that we've just talked about it being fairly bloated in that position and maybe moving players on, I'd be inclined to save the finances, resources for other positions, personally.
Just before we move on, actually, obviously we know the answer now, but if we'd have done this a week or two ago, what would you have done with Kabak?
That would have depended if there was a better option coming in, like there proved to be. I thought he was okay, solid, but I wasn't particularly overly impressed either. I wasn't a bit that turn beige.
Yeah, I felt a bit too harsh on him at the start. I feel like I went really early along the lines of Liverpool won't keep this player. So I'm kind of glad that's how it worked out. Otherwise, I would have had egg on my face. I do think he was fine. No issues there, but I do think a player like Konaté has got a higher ceiling, and I think Liverpool can aspire to that. So, yeah, I would have let him go back to Schalke, and I think I would have searched for someone who's better, essentially, and I think Konaté is. So, the midfield then. This is another one that will probably split opinions. So Liverpool currently have Jordan Henderson, Thiago, Fabinho, James Milner, Curtis Jones, Ox, Naby Keita, and if you're including who's coming home, Marco Grujic. So you got 7/8 midfielders there. There's a bit of a common consensus that Liverpool needs to buy a midfielder because Wijnaldum's leaving. So we'll start with, before we move on to whether you're buying anyone or whatever, we'll start with what you're doing with the players we've currently got, because that kind of comes first, I suppose. So we'll start with the trickiest one of them all. For me, I found this one difficult. What are you doing with Naby Keita?
Good question. Keita is tough because, it just has not happened, has it? And
No.
it feels like so much is being invested that you almost don't want to cut ties and you just want to stick at it a little bit longer and hope it comes to fruition. But I just can't see it. I mean, short answer, I'd be inclined to maybe give him just one more year, because what actually rings it through me is a conversation we had on Analysing Anfield a couple of months ago, where you pointed out his age, still kind of mid-20s. I think he's 25. He's not technically even in his prime years yet. So, with that in mind, maybe I'd be inclined to go one more year. Plus, go on.
I was going to say, see the really difficult thing with this is why I was caught between posts is he's got 2 years on his deal remaining. So if Liverpool do go one more year, they're then in a position next summer where he's got 1 year left on his deal. Do you give him a new contract to preserve his value? Do you sell him with a year left? Do you let his contract run all the way down and just take a hit if he ends up leaving? So he's in that kind of difficult place at the minute where he's clearly a good player. Liverpool clearly want to keep him, probably because of his level. But he's just not getting on the pitch enough for Liverpool to even kind of assess what to do with him, really. And I'm just not sure what the response would be if, say, a bid for 25 million was to come in for him this summer. I'm curious to know what the club would do with that, because that would tempt me. Despite the fact he's good, quite clearly good, his availability at Liverpool is pretty much getting worse by the year rather than better. So if we go back to 2016, that was RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga. So he started 29 league matches. A year later, he started 23. Then he moved to Liverpool, starts 16. Next season at Liverpool, starts 9. And the season just finished, he started 7. He started 7 games in the Premier League.
Surprised it's even that.
Yeah, well, it's the kind of thing that I have just kind of almost blocked out because I want him to do well, and it just gets me down the fact that it's even the case. But the fact he's almost starting less with time, there's no indication there that it's getting better. And it is a tricky question, that one, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's a straightforward answer on that one. It might just depend what happens with, interest from other parties. If you can get half your money back, then do you take it?
I think for me, on this one, I would be inclined to keep him. And I wouldn't be actively looking to sell him. And I think I'd assess his contract situation next summer. But I do think, in the meantime, if any sort of interest materialises around him, if any bids come in, I wouldn't just put the phone down. There'd be an element there of, do we take a loss here? Do we accept that it's kind of not happening? Because it's now been about 5 years since he played over 2,000 league minutes in a season. So if he starts becoming available again, it just, if you haven't done that for 5 years, it can get difficult to just start doing it again out of nowhere. But
well, his issue is, Josh, isn't it? He breaks down, and what's going to test that more? Playing regularly after not playing for a long time. That just opens the door to break down even more. So, yeah, I agree.
So, Marco Grujic.
Sell.
Please.
Yeah. Sorry about the prompt answer there, but yeah, it's sell who will ever pay to take him, because I'll be honest, Josh, up until we talked about, preparation for the show, I forgot all about him. I know I knew he was at Porto, but yeah, I don't even think he was playing week in, week out there anyway. So yeah, just take what you can get, if anything. But when's his contract up?
Well, this forms part of my answer. I would sell him, and I think this summer in particular, I would try to avoid loaning him again, because from this summer he's got 2 years left now. So if we have to loan him again, that means next summer he's probably getting sold with a year left on his deal, which means we're not getting much for him. But yeah, but I don't want to be too harsh on him. Don't get me wrong. I think he's had a series of loans, and he's generally done quite well at every club he's been loaned to, with the exception of maybe Porto this season. I haven't checked, but I don't think he's played that much.
I think he played about 2,000 minutes, which it says it's a player who's kind of played but not maybe started every game.
See, in the league only, he started 9 times, and he's only played about 800 minutes.
Oh, there you go, then.
I don't think he's had the best campaign. Again, I think he's a decent talent. I think he'd suit plenty of sides, to be honest. Decent player. But he's just never maybe generated the clamour around his name the way like a Brewster did, and the way Phillips maybe has now. Grujic has never really achieved that, but yeah, he's the answer. If we can find a buyer, I'd definitely sell him. I think he's had enough loans now and he's also, I think he's like 26 now or something. So if you're gonna sell him, you want to do it now while he's still in his prime, rather than when he's kind of pushing it.
Yeah, I agree.
And then Ox, Dave. There's a few question marks around Ox, I suppose, from certain people. Just thought to throw the question in there, really.
Well, you threw me off a little bit when you mentioned him earlier as a wing back, because maybe we may differ on this, but I'm just of the opinion to sell him. To be honest, I think it would suit both parties. I do think he could still go and be an effective player at another club. You know, someone like a West Ham springs to mind. I don't know if they've been linked, and that's why it's in there. But yeah, I feel like he could go and be, you know, an effective starter at another club, but I just don't think he does it enough for Liverpool, to be blunt. And so I'd be inclined to get some money back if I could.
Yeah, with me, I've got down keep, but I think if any interest was to emerge around him, and if like bids of around 20 million maybe were to come in for him, I would be tempted. As I said, I wouldn't be in a rush to sell him, wouldn't be actively putting him on a transfer list or whatever you want to call it. Because I think, above everything, I think he's just a really good character to have around the squad, to be honest. But and he's versatile, really versatile. He can play in the front line, he can play in midfield. I think he can play as a right back. So yeah, I wouldn't actively look to sell him, but I think he's another one who, if you're being honest, you could probably admit he's probably never going to progress beyond a fringe player for Liverpool now. So if you get 20 million off for a fringe player, do you take it? So yeah, that's my answer on that one. But then again, main question, Dave, any more signings in the midfield department?
So I actually don't think it would hurt Liverpool to bring in a new face if they could, especially losing Wijnaldum. And a player who springs to mind, Rosewell's him a few times this year, and we spoke about him, although it wasn't my pick, it was actually someone you flagged a couple of weeks ago. But maybe like a Koopmeiners or something from AZ could be an option, just because I think he does a lot of good things with the ball, and he's a good age at 23. I don't know if he's exactly suited to this Liverpool side, because it's something that you need to look into a little bit more. But just it doesn't need to be him precisely, but just that kind of profile. A player who kind of does make stuff happen from the middle, good on both sides of the game. With and without the ball, and a good age. I think it would be Liverpool could do with one more face in there, because looking at midfield, Henderson, Thiago, Fabinho, fantastic players. But if one of them isn't free, not ideal, because you've got Milner coming in, and I know Milner's like a never-ending, like it's like those the AA batter. I can't think of the brand. I thought maybe I should mention them. Duracell, yeah, he's like he's got an endless supply of Duracell batteries. But the reality is at some point he will start slowing down. It could well be next season, given his age. Got Jones, who's obviously a really good player. Jones is nice to have there, but you're only really looking at a midfield of 4 there, and I'd say 3 of them. Well, Henderson, Thiago, close to 30 or hitting 30, being 27. So I do think one nice, new fresh face top player would be a nice addition.
Yeah, I think I'm similar. I think when it comes to this, I don't think Liverpool need a centre mid addition the way they needed a centre back. It's not a need for me. And I think we will get to the forward line soon, but maybe some of this would relate to what happens in the forward line and who Liverpool sign there. But when it comes to who Liverpool might sign in midfield, I've looked at it, and I think specifically last season surprised me, because last season made me aware of, I suppose, what Liverpool kind of do in these situations. Thiago Alcantara is not really that much of a Liverpool player. You could probably say he's not a typical Klopp player, is he? But I think when he was added because he was just the squad didn't have a player like him. He was adding a new element to the team. Liverpool didn't really have that metronome type player, that conductor, and he got added to the squad for that reason, really, because he was just another tool to add to Liverpool's weaponry, if you like. So I've looked at the squad, and I think, what kind of is he that, or what isn't he that Liverpool, haven't got, that Liverpool kind of could add, that they, just to give Klopp another tool that he doesn't already have. And I think maybe I was thinking like a scoring number 10/number 8 type. Someone like a Bruno Fernandes, a Kevin De Bruyne, James Maddison, Mason Mount. That player who can play as an 8, but can play as a 10, and just chips in fairly frequently with goals. Liverpool don't really seem to have that. If you look at what Liverpool have got, Henderson, no. Thiago, no. Fabinho, no. Milner, no. Curtis Jones, maybe. Ox, possibly, but he doesn't get on the pitch often enough. And Keita, I would say no. And then this comes into the fact that I'll speak about him now. Shaqiri, rumoured to be potentially leaving, and if he did leave, maybe Liverpool would be light on the number 10s area. Shaqiri can play there. If he left, Firmino would be the only player really in the squad who can play as a 10. Obviously, Thiago can kind of do it, I suppose, but I'm just thinking what Liverpool don't have, just that kind of scoring threat that I suppose many rivals have got, but Liverpool don't. And I thought about, who potentially fits that bill. And I've just come up with 2 names. Just, I'm not sure if Liverpool are going to chase them, but number 1 is, hopefully I'm not going to butcher his name, Houssem Aouar at Lyon. Really good player, really technical. I think he's played as an 8 and as a 10 in recent times. I think he's even played on the wing and stuff. But he's chipped in with decent regularity at Lille. Get up his numbers now. Still very young. He's only 22, but he's been around for a fair few seasons now. Past this season, scored 7. Without penalties, he scored 5. Season before, he scored 3. Season before, he scored 7. Season before, he scored 6. Versatile, and obviously, I don't think Lille qualify for the Champions League. Did he, Dave?
Lille?
Sorry, Lyon.
Oh yeah, I was supposed to say they won the league. Yeah, I think they had a pretty poor season, this by their standards at least. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I've just seen the odd little rumor saying like they'll accept 30 million for Aouar and things like this, and just given what Liverpool maybe don't have in the squad, I wouldn't be overly surprised if Liverpool looked at Aouar and just tested the water really with a bid, because like Kanate, he's really young, but also has loads of minutes behind him as well, where you can accurately judge what he is. He's not just new on the scene. Like this next player that I'm going to mention, who is Pedro Goncalves. He's been linked quietly recently. Are you aware of him, Dave?
No, not on my radar.
He's at Sporting, and he's kind of had a little bit of a Bruno Fernandes season, to be honest, when he was over there. His numbers are crazy.
So kind of took as he's filled Fernandes' shoes, has he?
Kind of, yeah, it looks like. I mean, in 2018-19, he played for Wolves as an academy player, I think, in the Premier League 2. Scored 3, assisted 2. Then he moved to Famalicão, hopefully I've pronounced that right, in Portugal, in the top division. Scored 5, assisted 5. And in this season, his first year at Sporting, he scored 23, mate. 23 goals, and 21 of them have been in non-penalty. So only two pens in there, yeah, and 3 assists.
What are the underlying numbers like his expected numbers?
Well, it's tricky because with that being the league that he's in, Portuguese and stuff, FBref or StatsBomb or whatever you want to call it, our provider, don't cover that. So I haven't actually checked his Wisecout numbers, Dave. We want to have a little look while I'm
have a look
speaking,
now. How'd you say his surname?
Goncalves.
Goncalves.
Pedro Goncalves. He's
it's spelled with a G-O-N, is it? Yeah, I've got him.
Yeah.
I'll look now while you're talking.
Yeah, still only 22, still very young. One issue, he's very small. He's only 5'8", and weight-wise as well, he's really light. So whether that could be an issue in the Premier League, I'm not sure. And the fact that Liverpool wouldn't have many minutes there to go on, basically, given that he's kind of burst onto the scene, unlike Aouar, who's been around for about 4 seasons now. I don't think I can see a move there, but it's just the kind of, I suppose, midfield attacking option who's really versatile, offers goals from deep that Liverpool don't have, and his numbers are, he's returned a serious amount there this season.
Yeah. I mean, as you'd probably expect with that goal return, he has massively overperformed. An XG of roughly 11, but you could make the case that even if that was to settle down, with that XG, that's quite good. And even if he's only to return, say, 13, 14, 15 goals, that's still a really good return for that position. And certainly something that would be appealing from a Liverpool perspective, isn't it? So, although it's an over performance in terms of scoring 23 goals from a combined XG of 11, I think the fact that his XG is 11 in the first place is a really good sign. And as I said, even if it was a bit less, in another season, maybe he isn't as clinical or a little bit less luck, and he was only to score maybe 15 goals. That's still a really good return and appealing, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, I suppose the kind of player Wijnaldum was, where he offered obviously lots of balance and stuff like that, but then if you needed him to, he could offer goals from midfield. Liverpool are maybe a little bit out without that now, and he could be light in the number 10 area because of Shaqiri leaving. So I'm just thinking, a number 8, number 10 type who offers goals. And looking at this lad, although he looks really lightweight, he's doing a lot and he's versatile. And him and Houssem Aouar are 2 players who I think roughly fit the bill, but we'll see what happens there. So, and then when it comes to the forwards, Dave, so last but not least, so we'll start with it's hard to group these players into fixed positions, because someone like Jota, for example, plays a bit everywhere. But we'll start with the left wing, which you've probably got Mane and Jota over there. To be honest, are you signing anyone? Are you keeping them? In fact, no. Forget about the signs. Are you keeping the players as they are?
Well, the obvious 4, yeah. Or if we're just splitting it up into Mane and Jota, yeah. Unless
use the 4.
Okay. Well, yeah, the obvious 4. I'm giving another year, unless something played out from here until the start of the season. If I'm not picking on him, I'll just use him as an example. But say Salah starts talking up a move to Barcelona, Real Madrid, or whatever, or makes it clear that he'd like to leave, and one of those clubs come in with a big offer. As I said, I can't see either of them doing it because they can't afford it. But PSG, anyone like that, and it become quite clear that he wanted to leave, then I'd explore the option of maybe selling and getting a really big payday for one of these players before the value probably decreases. But if none of that happens, I'd be inclined just to keep all 4 together and give them another full year.
Yeah, I would as well. I think specifically, it's funny that you mentioned Salah, because I think when it comes to Salah, he'd be the one I'd be least inclined to sell. Obviously, alongside Jota. Jota just came, wouldn't be selling Jota, but I think Firmino and Mane, I'd be happier to sell. But despite saying that, I'd keep them all comfortably. If a bid comes in, a bid comes in, maybe there's a conversation there. But I think when it comes to those 4 players, for me, they absolutely stay. But then there's a few players around those that are just maybe floating a little bit. So we'll start with Harry Wilson.
Wilson is a bizarre one. Can I throw another name into this, by the way?
Yeah,
For us to
good.
talk about Woodburn, because
Okay.
he. I was watching. I've watched the under-23s a couple of times recently, and he's playing for them. I just think that's mad. But yeah,
Playing
Wilson.
is he playing well?
I'll be honest. I don't sound too critical, but not really. Not what I expect. I don't know if he's maybe
Okay.
lacking the motivation. But a player of his kind of pedigree at that level, you expect to stand out, and wasn't that impressed. But anyway, Wilson, I'd sell. You know, I think the club would like to get a deal done, but I just don't know if there's any clubs out there who are actually willing to commit to buying. You know, plenty seems to be willing to take him on loan, and he seems to do okay on loan, but you know, not actually when it comes to making the purchase. So for me, Josh, sell.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think again, similar to a few other ones, it's one that you kind of want to get permanently done this summer because he's got 2 years left on his deal.
Mm.
So if you have to loan him again next summer, it becomes a bit more of a cheaper option for clubs who are wanting to buy him. But he has had a decent season at Cardiff. He's registered 7 goals and 11 assists. So that's not a bad return. You know, none of those have been penalties either.
Mm.
So he's a decent player. You know, he should be interested in him. It just depends on, I suppose, Liverpool's asking price, which sometimes can be a little bit weighty. But he's a player I'd sell. I wouldn't have any interest in keeping him. Hopefully Liverpool can get a buyer there. Next player, though, a little bit interesting, Dave. This will be a curious one, this. So, Harvey Elliott.
It was weird, actually. I had an idea of my answer to this one, and now I'm really on the fence. I don't know why it's changed. But I'll be fair, and I'll say what I was going to say initially, which was I think it wouldn't kill him to have another loan move potentially in the Premier League, just so he could continue to, you know, try and develop, because he's still so young. Like, you kind of, yeah, he's like 20, 21, but he's not. No, he's still a teenager. He's 18, is he? 17, 18. So I've been inclined to give him another loan because I don't think he's ready to push for a start at Liverpool. But I do think he's a good option to have if he did stick around. But I'm going to go with another loan in the Premier League this time, though.
Yeah, see, this is another tricky one, and this is what I was saying earlier. When it comes to, it's difficult to say yes or no regarding a certain decision because of how many decisions relate to, well, what if he goes or he stays or whatever. If Liverpool can sell, mind you, you know what? I've just realised I haven't even thrown Minamino into this. He's still on loan, isn't he?
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about him in a sec. But all these players that Liverpool have got in attack, the likes of Shaqiri, Origi, if Liverpool can sell Wilson and Origi and possibly Shaqiri as well, which I think the club would, I think I would be inclined to keep Elliott simply because of the weight that we've lost in attack there and the options. We can't just start going to buy everyone. So we do need numbers to an extent in attack. And I think if we was to get rid of those players, I think that would free up a bit of space for Elliott then to be used. But a lot of that would depend on who we can manage to actually shift from the squad. And I don't disagree with what you've said in terms of whether he is definitely ready and whether he'd benefit from a loan move to a Premier League club. I was going to say Premiership then, Dave.
Need a time machine as well.
To a Premier League club, because I think in the Championship this season, you know, we've flagged him a few times. I've tweeted about him once or twice. He's doing really, really well. Very interesting player. Reminds me a lot of. I've compared him a little bit to Grealish because he doesn't score that much, but he's really creative, really good at moving the ball forward, really good at seeing things that other players don't see, getting you into the penalty box, those sorts of things. So if Liverpool can sell the right players, I would be inclined to keep him, but if not, I wouldn't have any issue either with a Premier League loan. Shaqiri, Dave?
Yeah, I think I'd sell Shaqiri as well, actually. He's the type of player that we always talk about, you know, he's another option. He can change the dynamic of the attack a little bit, but doesn't really seem to do that much when he actually does. And to be honest with you, that's maybe even a little bit harsh. I just think Liverpool could probably have an upgrade for that kind of profile in the squad.
Yeah, Klopp seems, for whatever reason, despite the fact that he's kind of a little bit of a key to the door, and he feels like a nice option to have on the bench, Klopp seems quite reluctant to use him a lot of the time, I think. And I think it'd be better to maybe get in a player who offers similar stuff to Shaqiri, but Klopp kind of has a bit more faith in and has the potential to still have his peak at Anfield, rather than Shaqiri, who's maybe past his peak. You know, he's now 29 years old. So, yeah, I would be inclined to sell him. Obviously, given his age, you absolutely wouldn't loan him. There's no loan deal to be had there. It's just a sale, or he stays. But yeah, I think I'd be inclined to sell him, even though I think he's been a solid purchase in Anfield, really. You know, we got him for about 13, 15 million. I think he's been a decent buy. And then Divock Origi, Dave, another one.
Get rid of him. Honestly, just I know he become a cult hero because he had this kind of perfect blend of scoring in really important emotional fixtures for Liverpool, aka Merseyside derbies. You know, seems to score a lot of goals against Everton. He scored some important goals in a few of big games in run-ins, title run-ins, and obviously he got the goal in Madrid on route to win the Champions League. But you know, in terms of just a player, he's nowhere near the level I think he needs to be an attacker in this Liverpool side, pushing to win the Premier League, do well in the Champions League and things. So he just needs to be sold, in my opinion.
Yeah, the only thing with Origi is he's contracted still until 2024, so he's not due to actually leave the club until Klopp is. So you're technically in no rush to sell him. He doesn't, he could technically be loaned for a year, and Liverpool would still have 3 years on his deal to still get a decent fee for him. I would obviously sell him, but what I'm saying is you don't have to force him out the door and take any fee for him. You could loan him and still get a decent fee next summer. But I think in terms of keeping him around the squad, I would definitely at the very least loan him just to get him playing, but to get him away from the team.
Get him away, yeah.
I don't want to sound horrible about it, but he's a player who I don't know how he's still at the club. Really, he's been at the club for a long time now, and as you said, he's delivered some emotional moments and stuff like that. But in terms of his level compared to those who he's playing alongside, he is definitely a step below. So he's a player who, if Liverpool can get some funds for, that'd be ideal. And then finally, Dave, I'll add on Minamino at the end. What are you doing with him?
Yeah, tell you what, it's not an easy job, Mr. Michael Edwards has, is it? Because there's a few grey areas, and he is a little bit of a one. I'm going to be honest. I'm inclined to say sell because it's an opportunity to get some funds in for the player who I'm not convinced it's going to work for. Had he went to Southampton and tore it up, shown the kind of Salzburg version of himself in the Premier League in a capacity, then yeah, I'd be thinking, okay, get him back to Anfield and let's see what he can do. In a settled campaign, but he just hasn't. So that to me says, if you can sell him, sell him.
Yeah, another one with still a few years left on his deal, so Liverpool wouldn't be in a rush to sell him. But I think it'd be interesting to see what Edwards and Klopp do if they've kind of got a bit of a straight choice as to who to loan out and who to keep between Elliott and Minamino. Because I think, looking at the season Elliott's had, albeit in the Championship, I do think there's a few points there that you could make in favour of keeping Elliott and loaning Minamino rather than keeping Minamino and loaning Elliott. But yeah, that's a tricky one, and it remains to be seen whether Southampton will want to keep him and stuff, so we'll keep an eye on that one. And then, crucially, Dave, the signing. So I assume you are making a signing in this department. So what are you looking at?
So there's a player that I think could be a good option wrote about him recently, and it's the reason I flag him really is because might end up playing at the Euros, going away to Belgium, and it's Jeremy Doku, who he's only 18. He joined Rennes or was it last summer? I think it was Rennes last summer in Ligue 1. Originally at Anderlecht. I think Liverpool actually tried to sign him about 3 years ago. But to be fair to him, he turned. Well, this is his side of the story, but apparently he turned down the move, just saying that he didn't believe he was ready to make such a step, and opted to kind of stick around and progress, develop more organically, playing consistent first team football, and he's turned out to be a good player in Ligue 1 this season. He's all he basically showed himself well in the numbers. For example, I've got it here. Yeah, of all the players who played over 1,000 minutes in that division, there was only 3 players, 2 of which were Mbappe and Neymar, who attempted more dribbles on a per 90 basis. Nearly 10 per 90, which is high. I wouldn't expect to see that at Liverpool, but then maybe. And I watched a lot of clips of him, and he has a lot of similarities to like a Sadio Mane type. He's really hard to predict on the ball. A bit of a maverick. Even though he's only small, maybe like 5'7", 5'8", he's quite strong. Got a lot of pace. Just really difficult to defend against. The only downside is he hasn't really got the output in the final third yet. He only contributed to 5 goals this season, but he's still so young. I just think he's a player who could maybe Liverpool could bring in for a reasonable fee, and he could grow under the likes of Mane, and then maybe go on to be like a successor. And he can play on both sides as well. So just the reason I flagged him, Josh, he was a player I wrote about recently. I know he's going to the Euros with Belgium, and he's just someone a little bit different to the names we've mentioned on here before. If we were going to go more predictable, maybe there might be like a Rafinha type character, because I think Rafinha is, a player we talked about before, and maybe he could be an option. But yeah, just someone I wanted to flag with yourself and obviously the people listening and watching.
Yeah, he was someone I was going to mention actually when we did the scouting pod a few weeks back, when we were just flagging names. He was on my list a little bit, but he got edged out by the 3 I ended up picking in the end. But I think when it comes to signings in the forward department, for me, if I was Edwards, I would look at a forward who can play across multiple positions, obviously, like Mane can, like Salah can, like Jota can. But and I think Liverpool should always look for players who are in a position to deliver now. I think they've done most of their developments, hopefully. So I've just listed 3 names that I think if I was in charge, I would be having a bit of a deeper look at, because I think they vaguely fit the criteria that I'm highlighting. One of them is Donyell Malen, who I think Dave flagged the other week on the scouting pod. Just having a good season at PSV. I think it's PSV. Versatile across multiple positions. I think he's played most of the time this season through the middle, but he can play on the left. He's played on the right a little bit as well. Right-footed. Scored 19 non-penalty goals in a Dutch Eredivisie this season, while also registering 8 assists, and he's still only 22. Another player who I think fits the bill, as you just mentioned, Dave, is Rafinha. Really good player, really intense, tricky, difficult to defend against, fast. About 24 years old, I think, so he's a good age. Got a few years left on his deal, so it remains to be seen how much he'd cost. But I think he's proved this season that he's really capable for a step up. And I saw someone tweet actually saying, comparing him to Sancho and stuff, and someone looked at Sancho's numbers and Rafinha's numbers in England, and they made a point as to if Rafinha had spent a year in Dortmund, he'd be posting Sancho numbers probably. That's debatable, but I do think there's a point there, to be honest. The only thing with Rafinha is he's left-footed. Now, Salah is also left-footed and obviously prefers the right side of the pitch because of that. And I've mentioned about keeping Harvey Elliott left-footed. So the only issue with that would be if I was to sign Rafinha, I'd have Rafinha, Salah and Elliott kind of all vying for the same spot, really, unless I was to loan Elliott out. But then there's going to be a point where Elliott starts to get more game time and then you've got a bit of a clogged position there a little bit, if you like. So that's a bit of an issue with that one. And the final player who I think, again, just fits the bill enough is another player I think we've mentioned in the past, in Hirving Lozano. So he used to be a PSV until he got to a point that Malen got to now, and he moved to Napoli. And I think he had a quiet start at Napoli, but this season in Serie A, he scored 11 times and assisted 3. And he's now 25 years old. He's fast, he's intense.
Is he still just 25, yeah?
Yeah.
A little bit older now.
Yeah, he's fast, he's intense. He suited to the general intensity of Liverpool's pressing game and stuff. Keen carry of the ball, tricky. So they're 3 players who I think still have enough room to evolve, but also have evolved enough to deliver for Liverpool right now. Very similar to Jota and very similar to Salah and Mane when they came to Liverpool. Immediately really good players, but they've also became better players at Anfield to the extent that they've essentially delivered a Premier League title, really. So I'd look at that. Against those players, it's difficult to determine who I'd buy because a lot of it depends on who'd go, who'd leave. But those are just names that I wanted to flag, really, David, as fitting the bill that I'm kind of after.
Yeah, and they are good players, and there's it's easy to see why any one of those 3 would be a good move. And I do have to say, I think it would be good for Liverpool to bring another forward in. I thought Jota definitely enhanced the attack whilst he was available last season, specifically before the injury. He kind of put some almost fresh life, I'd say, into the front line. And I think if Liverpool are really going to want to go again in terms of pushing for the Premier League, I think they're going to need that. They're going to need those new faces, because I don't know if you caught it, Josh. I was watching BT's interview with Guardiola and Ferdinand, and he was asking Guardiola, how do you continue to motivate your side each year to go? Yeah, did you see it to go and win trophies? And he said, didn't he? He responded with a question to Ferdinand. He said, how many Premier Leagues did you win? Ferdinand won 6. He said, and the team who won the first, was that the same as the team that won the last? And obviously he responded no. And he said, well, Guardiola pointed out that's key. He said, got to bring in new faces, got to switch it up, re-energize the squad. And I think that'll be important. Just bringing in one new quality attacker can give Liverpool's front line a massive boost next season.
Yeah. So to conclude, I think we can probably say that Liverpool have got a fair amount of selling to do now after signing Konate. Obviously, you didn't need to sell anyone ready to get Konate, and that was a must. And I think if Liverpool can get the sell done, I would look to bring in an additional forward, perhaps one of those 3 names that I've just listed. And then perhaps, if we're being greedy and if we get the players sold that we want, I would look at, a number 10/number 8 who will chip in with goals, such as the 2 that I listed earlier. So yeah, I think we'll conclude there, Dave. We're a little bit over the usual hour mark. But yeah, thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. Hopefully it was a good listen. And cheers, mate. Cheers, everyone.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week to continue recording throughout the summer. So if you've got any ideas for podcasts for us, do give us a shout. We'll see what we can do. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.